Are you saying that there are currently non-U.S. citizens voting in federal elections? And if that's what you're saying, then do you have an estimate of how many?
The answer is that it's unanswerable. That is the problem. States are not allowed right now to prove if somebody claims on that simple form that they're a citizen and they can vote. They're not allowed to prove whether it's true or not. We all know intuitively that a lot of illegals are voting in federal elections, but it's not been something that is easily provable. We don't have that number. This legislation will allow us to do exactly that. It will prevent that from happening, and if someone tries to do it, it will now be unlawful, and the states will have a mechanism to prove whether they are or not. And to suggest that this is some sort of revenge tour is kind of a silly notion. What we are doing, and what we explained here over and over, is that we have a constitutional responsibility. We have an obligation to the people that we are elected to represent, to every citizen in this country, to ensure that our elections are secure. That should not be, as was said earlier, a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It should not be partisan.
Speaker Mike Johnson is getting back to his primary job of working for Trump's campaign. I'll show you for the third time what they told us. House Republicans work solely for him.
Everything that we do in the House of Representatives should be in the best interest of getting Donald Trump reelected. This guy right here.
Now, keep that in mind as Johnson continues his embarrassing promotion of this needless bill.
There is currently an unprecedented and a clear and present danger to the integrity of our election system, and that is the threat of non-citizens and illegal aliens voting in our elections. Some have noted that it's already a crime for non-citizens to vote in a federal election, and that is true. It's clear that our election process is worth protecting. It is our responsibility as members of Congress and concerned leaders of citizens groups and organizations who care about the integrity of our system and our elections. It is our duty to ensure that this is done. Even if you weren't concerned about the drop boxes and the ballot harvesting and the mail-in ballots in 2020, you definitely should be concerned that illegal aliens might be voting in 2024. And that's why it is critical that we pass the SAVE Act to safeguard our federal elections and ensure that only Americans get to decide American elections.
He included some standard fear-mongering about how you should be scared of undocumented immigrants voting, even if you weren't afraid of the lies that he told before. Baseless boogeyman stories are always easily transferred from one of their empty claims to the next.
And, you know, the allegations about these voting machines, some of them being rigged with this software by Dominion, look, there's a lot of merit to that. And when the president says the election is rigged, that's what he's talking about, that the fix was in. You know, I could give you example after example in all these states. I don't know how much time y'all have this morning, but there's some of these lawsuits have a lot of merit, and we need to exhaust all the legal remedies. But they know that in Georgia, it really was rigged. It was set up for the Biden team to win. And I'm saying that the system is set up for massive fraud and error and irregularity, and we cannot have that in our election system. And that's why we're saying exhaust all the legal remedies. We have to do that. The president knows we have to do that. If we don't, people are not going to have any confidence in the election system itself. When you have, you know, a software system that is used all around the country that is suspect because it came from Hugo Chavez's Venezuela. And that's the problem that we're up against, and that's why the president is so frustrated, and that's why so many, 71, 73 million Americans around the country feel like that the election was stolen from them.
No word yet from Mike Johnson about how wrong he was about the 2020 election being stolen because of Hugo Chavez's voting machines, which was a lie we heard from Sidney Powell, who flipped on Trump over their scheme to subvert the election in Georgia. He tested that one, and after it failed, it's time to poison more MAGA minds by pushing a similar election fraud lie with this legislation. Again, at the behest of their boss, who's always creepily watching and making sure the lies are told to his satisfaction. Mike can probably feel him breathing down his neck.
What we're going to do is the House Republicans are introducing a bill that will require proof of citizenship to vote. It seems like common sense. I'm sure all of us would agree. We only want U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections. But there are some Democrats who don't want to do that.
The downside for them is that there's still people willing to reveal the truth about the legitimacy of our election system and dispel the lies being told to help Trump advance his dishonest and divisive campaign.
What the speaker got wrong was the law that was passed, when the motor boat law was passed in 1993. In 1996, the Congress passed the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act. That act makes it explicitly illegal for non-citizens to vote. Now, There is, in some places in New York, there's in Tacoma Park in Maryland, there are instances where non-citizens can vote in local municipal elections. That does not mean that they can vote in federal elections, and there is no evidence.
But do you trust?
No, wait a minute, allow me to finish. According to the Heritage Foundation's database on voter fraud, for non-citizens, there's been fewer than 50 cases of non-citizens voting in elections since 2002. So the idea that there's this mass voter fraud happening where illegals are running to the polls and voting in mass numbers, there's zero evidence. Not only is the Heritage Foundation, hold on, wait a second, I didn't interrupt anybody.
You know that, right?
But not only is this, not only is the Heritage Foundation said this, the Bipartisan Policy Center has said this, the Brennan Center for Justice has said this, the FBI has said this over and over and over again. People keep saying that there's voter fraud, and there's no evidence of voter fraud. There's no evidence of non-citizens voting in federal elections.
It's a bill in search of a problem that already has a law in place that made it illegal a couple of decades ago. The purpose is to fool more conservatives into believing that those scary migrants that Trump famously claimed are rapists bringing drugs and crime are voting in our elections and tipping the scales for Democrats. All these lies are being peddled in coordination with Trump's directive to his campaign arm of Republicans in the House to make sure the border issue remains unsolved. I mean, you can't lie about migrants illegally voting without making sure the problem that you claim Democrats won't solve remains a problem.
We actually had an immigration deal coming out of the Senate for hundreds of new Border Patrol officers and asylum officers and asylum judges and fentanyl detection machinery, and it was vetoed by the fourth branch of government, Donald Trump, who said he didn't want a border solution, he wanted a border crisis to run on. So you judge for yourself the seriousness of the claims that they want to do something about immigration.
Let's see what the leader of the Senate, Republican, said. And I will quote him. That's Mitch McConnell. He said, quote, "Trump didn't seem to want us to do anything at all." Another Republican senator said Trump, quote, "doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it."
But Trump's clueless targets have been told never to believe the facts that are in front of their faces, especially when they're being delivered by Democrats. So how's about these guys?
There's been no evidence of widespread fraud. Actually, most of the evidence I've seen so far has been Republicans trying to corrupt the election.
What's wrong with Congress then, Congressman? I mean, why can't you actually move the needle on securing the border? I understand you need a willing partner on the other side, and you haven't had that. But it's frustrating to see all of these illegals coming in and the drugs flowing in, and really no movement.
The problem is the Republicans, not the Democrats. We know how the Democrats are going to vote. It's too many of my Republican colleagues are unwilling to vote to secure the border.
Now, what these rhinos, Mitt Romney and Representative Keith Self, are saying is that the voting fraud has been linked to Republicans and that the border issue the GOP complains about has been kept alive by Republicans so that Trump has something to campaign on other than how unfair it is that he's not allowed to be above the law. The Supreme Court is working on changing that last part for him. But all this comes back to one basic truth that you just might have heard before.
Everything that we do in the House of Representatives should be in the best interest of getting Donald Trump reelected.